Welcome you all for the biology session. This is Manjunath here. In today's class, let us discuss about the chapter Locomotion and Movement. So earlier class we discussed about different types of muscles and types of movements and how they are utilized by an organism to show movement and locomotion. So now let us continue with the human the skeletal system. So here the very important thing is we have the two types of skeletal system. So one is exoskeletal, we can say that the exoskeleton, and the other one is endoskeleton. So exoskeleton vary from organisms to organism, and in lower organisms it will be in different they made up of different structures. The exoskeleton sometime it will be consisting of hard parts present on the surface of the body. So exoskeleton means hard parts present on the body, present on the body means they are externally present on the surface of the body. So whereas you can say that they found in both invertebrates and vertebrates, these exoskeleton will be there in both invertebrates and vertebrates. Exoskeleton, which includes, like we can say that in invertebrates we can say shells are present, and like that in some other organisms like the tortoise, their body is covered by bony plates. So bony plates, shells in mollusks, whereas bony plates in tortoise. So these are the structures which act as generally exoskeleton. So exoskeleton mainly includes so many structures, like we can mention that scales, feathers in case of the birds, right, and then claws, horns, nails, right, hooves, right, in the animals like horse and other the ruminant animals, we can see this hooves. Right, so many other examples which comes under generally the exoskeleton. Endoskeleton, so whenever we consider that largely in higher animals like mammals, these structures are made up of mainly bones. Not only bones, I already mentioned that along with that we can also say that cartilage, bones and cartilage, that forms a framework. But bone forms the majority of the body framework, and little cartilage will be there. Little cartilage will be there compared to bones. In this, generally the human bone, in the newborn baby, or you can say that the young one, up to there will be 300 bones will be there, and that will be keep on the fusing, right, and those bones the fuses and something they're going to form around 206 bones in adults, right. So these 206 bones we can they categorized into axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton means the bones which are present along the the axis. So if you consider that this is a longitudinal axis, longitudinal axis, so all along the length you can say that the bones which present, right, those bones are called as axial bones. Axial bones are the bones which lies along the longitudinal axis of the body, right. These mainly helps, supports and protects the organs like we can say that the mainly which to maintain the shape, or you can say that the position of the neck along with that is the trunk and head. So this here we can say that the skull, it includes skull and includes ribs, and this is what the vertebral column, vertebral column, right? So these are the components, or you can say skeletal elements, which comes under axial skeleton. That is, one is skull, ribs, and then vertebral column. And this structure which will be there generally, what is it, this one which is called as sternum. So both, what is it, the ribs and sternum together forms, what is it, rib cage, together forms rib cage. So these are the bones which are, what is it, generally comes under axial skeleton. So axial skeleton mainly includes, what is it, bones, skull, ribs, sternum, vertebral column. Both ribs and sternum together forms rib cage. So with this, next the one more which is the appendicular. See, they are present, what is it, the lateral, they are present lateral to the longitudinal axis. So which are associated with the appendages, right? Generally these we can say that the, what is it, appendages means limbs. So this is both together which forms, what is it, the pectoral girdle. They are present laterally, lateral to the longitudinal axis, we can at the sides. And these girdles, pectoral girdles, helps the limbs to attach with vertebral column. And these which are there in the lower part of the body, if you consider these structures, this together constitute or forms generally, what is that, pelvic girdle. So let us know about this and then we can take some questions. Appendicular bones mainly includes bones of forelimbs and bones of hind limbs. Forelimbs is associated or attached with the pectoral girdle, and each girdle, generally you can say the pectoral girdle, what is it, which has two halves, right? And each of with, what is it, the two bones. We can discuss about that. Mainly here I can mention that scapula and clavicle, scapula and clavicle. So in this, the very important thing, what is it, the forelimbs associated with pectoral girdle. Same like that, what is it, the bones of hind limbs associated with pelvic girdle. So pelvic girdle forms, what is that, hip bones. Let us move on to the skull. So as we know that the skull mainly includes cranium, that is bony box, bony box. And this is where we can say that the different, what is it, the structures are there. And in this, the cranium, there are 8 bones, 8 bones. And then a face, I can say facial bones. In face there are 14 bones, and along with that the one single bone which is there, iod, right? Iod bone is a bone to which generally present at the base of the buccal cavity, right? Base of the buccal cavity, to which, what is it, the tongue attaches, tongue muscles attach, tongue and tongue muscles, what is it, attaches and forms, what is it, floor, forms floor of the buccal cavity, floor of the buccal cavity, right? We know that roof is mainly because of palatine bone, right? So here there are different types of, what is it, the bones in the skull. One is a frontal, so this is the frontal, right? And this is, we can consider as a frontal single one, and this side one, and other side, the next side one, that is 2 parietal bones, and they are paired, parietal 2, and below that parietal, that is temporal bone. These are also one side and left side and right side, that is 2 in number. So temporal bones and all these bones of the the skull, which are attached with the help of these sutures. So these sutures are called as fibrous joints. These sutures, what is it? Generally forms of fibrous joints which are immovable, cannot be able to move, made up of, mainly contains white collagenous fiber, cartilaginous fiber ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, hence it is not helps in movement, no movement, immovable, completely immovable, that is fibrous joint present seen in skull, that too that forms sutures. And next in this, what is it here? So this frontal one, parietal, that is 2 in number, total 3, and this is 2, 5, what is it, the 5, and occipital single, this is single, 6, and iod bone and ethmoid bone. So here this is a iod bone. Already we discussed that this bone which helps in, what is it, generally attaches with a tongue, right? The tongue which attaches with this iod bone, and one more, that is ethmoid bone. So these bones which are present seen in the, what is it, ethmoid bone is single. So total 8 bones: frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, and then ethmoid. So 4 are single, 2 are paired. And facial also there are 14 bones, mainly which includes like nasal, right here, which forms a nasal bone, right, forms a bridge of the nose, and then zygomatic bone which forms a cheekbone, right, along with maxillae, upper jaw, and then these are 2, zygomatic 2, and then maxillae 2, nasal bone 2, and lacrimal, that is the, generally whenever we will consider that that is also in both eyes, that is 2. And in this case, the very important thing, the mandible, lower one, this is the one, that is the mandible is the only bone in the face which is immovable, only bone in the facial bone which is immovable, and longest bone articulates with the temporal bone of the skull. This question we can expect. Mandible articulates with the, what is it, temporal bone. Next, occipital, sphenoid, that is sphenoid bone, this is a 1, and occipital, generally you can say that the skull, and this is also related to skull only, sphenoid bone, right? So that is what you have to keep it in mind. And palatines, inferior nasal, and omer bone. So omer bone, here we can, what is it, the, say this, nasal to maxillae, nasal forms a bridge of the nose, nasal forms, what is it, the bridge of the nose, maxillae forms upper jaw and jawbone, and zygomatic forms, what is it, the cheekbones, lacrimal, that is in the orbits, helps in the formation of orbits or sockets, palatine, palate forms, that is also 2, inferior nasal, they forms a lateral walls of the nose, and then mandible, that is lower jaw, omer, which forms a septum, nasal septum divider. So that is what an iod U-shaped bone to which the forms of floor of the buccal cavity. And last, that is malleus and incus stapes. These are the ear ossicles. Malleus is hammer shaped. They are present seen in the middle ear. All these ossicles are present seen in the middle ear. Malleus is hammer shaped. Incus is anvil shape, and then stapes is stirrup shape. So stapes, among all these bones in the body, steps is the smallest bone. Stapes is the, what is that, smallest bone of the body, smallest bone in the body. And the largest is, we can say, femur bone. Femur bone is the longest bone, and longest, we can say largest also, and longest and strongest bone in the body. If we're going to ask infasial bone, that is longest and strongest is mandible. So next we can say that is the vertebrae. So here the vertebrae, there are different types, generally 5 types. That is cervical vertebrae, there are 7. So if you're going to say that the vertebral formula, here we can write like this, that is 7 cervical vertebrae in almost all the mammals, same, right? And then what is it, the thoracic vertebrae, which will be there in the thoracic region, what is it, thoracic region, and this is in the neck region, cervical in the neck region, and thoracic vertebrae, lumbar in the, what is it, generally it forms, what is it, the bone, that is a backbone in the abdominal region, and this forms a trunk, and this is like the caudal posterior end, and which forms a caudal end, or we can also say that the coccyx generally forms coccyx, that is the last vertebrae. So in adults, generally 5 bones. Here you can say 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, and 1 sacral vertebrae, that is fused by the 5 bones, that formed by the fusion of 5 bones. And one more, that is last one, coccyx, that is formed by the fusion of 4 bones. Hence we can say this is in adults. In the embryonic stage, the vertebral formula will be 7, 12, 5, and 5 bones fused in adult, 5, and 4 bones, 4. So in embryonic stage there will be 33 vertebrae, whereas in adult there will be 26 vertebrae. So with this we can move on to, there are 5 types, very important, 26 in adult, 33 in, what is that, the embryonic stage. Next, so that is what the sternum and rib cage. So sternum, which is a flat bone, what is it, the dragger shape, which is also called as breastbone. So here we can keep it in mind that these are the articulatory surface for the ribs, right? This is called as, what is it, the prosternum. This is called as prosternum, where two pairs of ribs can articulate from the upper region, right? And total in this 7 pair, what is it, which are called as true ribs, they generally articulates with sternum. So this is mesosternum, and this is called as xiphoid process. So total ribs are 12 pairs. So out of the 12 pairs, first 7 pairs are called as true ribs, because they are attached dorsally with the vertebral column, that is the thoracic vertebrae. This is the vertebral column, that is mainly thoracic vertebrae, and ventrally with the sternum. This is sternum. If both dorsally and ventrally attached, then they are called as true ribs. So these true ribs, what is that? While they are attaching with the sternum, mainly in this zone we can see hyaline cartilage. So this is what, in this point of attachment with the sternum, mainly made up of, that helps in what is that, expansion, to change the volume of thoracic cavity. So that is where we can say hyaline cartilage. Right, so hyaline cartilage is generally the matrix of the hyaline cartilage, which is called as chondroitin, as it is made up of chondroitin salts. Hence these true ribs are called as generally these true ribs, which are also called as, in case of ribs, true ribs, which are also called as vertebro, they are attached with the sternum, they are called as sternal ribs. Right, and next, what is it, that is the first 7 pairs, and 8th, 9th and 10th pairs, they are not attached. Say this one is 8th, 9th, 8th, this is the 7th one, and they are attached with the 7th one and indirectly attached with the sternum. So this is the, what is it, the 8th one, and this one is the 9th one, and this 10th one. So this all together attached to the 7th vertebrae and indirectly attaches with the sternum, means dorsally attached with thoracic vertebrae, but ventrally they are not attached directly to the sternum, but with the help of, what is that, 7th vertebra, they are attached with 7th vertebra, they are attached with the sternum. So that is why they are called as false ribs, which are also called as vertebrochondral ribs. So this is what you have to keep it in mind. And 11th and 12th pair, which are floating ribs, attached dorsally but ventrally they are free, hence they are called as floating ribs. These two are floating ribs. So with this we can conclude. And forelimbs and hindlimbs, before going to take that, we will take some questions related to this, and next we can take. So while discussing about this question, the very important thing, we should know what is exactly the cervical vertebra. I already mentioned that there are 7 cervical vertebra present in neck region, and first cervical vertebra is called as atlas. So atlas, which, what is it, the articulates with the second cervical vertebra, that is axis. So axis, if you consider, this is the axis with the transverse processes which will be there, and this is the odontoid peg. This is the odontoid peg with which generally that articulates, right, generally articulates with the, this is the odontoid peg. To that peg the atlas body articulates, right, and that will going to attached with, this is with the facet, condyloid facet, right, and here also the transverse process will be there when articulates. So that is what we can say. So these facets, upper facets, generally here very important thing is this peg is called as odontoid peg, and there is a process in the, this is atlas, first cervical vertebrae, which odontoid process. So because of that process attaches with the peg and forms, they will go into rotatory movement, which shows rotatory movement, either the clockwise or anti-clockwise. So that is why we can say that joint is called as pivot joint. One bone which shows circulatory movement, or so not circulatory, rotatory movement, which can turn, which helps in, the neck rotation, or you can say that it turn to right or left. That is what we can say odontoid process. So in human beings, second cervical vertebrae, that is what axis, which helps in rotatory movement, the head, rotatory movement of the head, movements of the head through knob like process called as. So that is what axis with the process. This is, here we can say, better to understand that this we can say, the facet, odontoid facet, means just a surface which which articulates with the odontoid peg. We can also call it as process. Better to say odontoid process. So odontoid process helps in articulation of atlas with axis. Atlas pivots over the axis, we can say. Pre-zygapophysis, post-zygapophysis, these are the articulatory facets or surface. So which are present, if they are present above the vertebrae, right, they are called as post-zygapophysis. If they are present below the the vertebrae, they are called as pre-zygapophysis. These are actually articulatory surface which helps in articulation. So answer for that is odontoid process. Next, humerus that does not articulate with. So we can take this, the concept, let us finish to understand that. So here, the forearm with the humerus, one humerus in each hand, radius and ulna. So this is the head which articulates with the clavicle, that too with the glenoid cavity. Glenoid cavity which is present seen in scapula, right? And then here we can say, better to say that glenoid cavity, right, which with glenoid cavity generally which with humerus head articulates. So that will going to attach and forms that joint is called as ball and socket joint. So this cavity is called as glenoid cavity, and this is a clavicle which is also called as collarbone that helps in articulation. So let us take this radius. This is ulna, that is longer than the radius, and carpals forms wrist bone. They are 8 in number. Metacarpals, palm bone, they are 5 in number. Phalanges, 14 in number. That forms digit bone. These are the digit bone. Formula for that, phalangeal formula, thumb, 2 digits. In the thumb and index finger 3, here on next 3, 3, 3. So phalangeal formula is 2, 3, 3, 3, 3. So total 14, right? So this is what we can say, right? Here the head of the ulna that articulates with lower depression. This is lower depression of the humerus. So this lower depression of the humerus. Here the process called as olecranon, fossa, or you can say process. So here this thing you have to keep in mind. And same like that, in the pectoral girdle we have two bones. One is scapula, that is scapula, triangular bone. One is clavicle. So these two are the pectoral girdle, bones of the pectoral girdle. Right, and in this case you have to keep it in mind, head of the humerus attached with glenoid cavity, and there is a process. We will take that here in this diagram. This is what a glenoid cavity. This is a glenoid cavity. Head articulates here, and this process with which the clavicle articulates. So this process is called as acromion process. So both acromion process and the glenoid cavity present seen in scapula helps in the formation of pectoral girdle. So this is what the scapula, which is generally called as shoulder blade, and this here the spiny ridge, right? This is the spiny ridge, spine, or you can say elevated part, elevated ridge, or which is also called as spine of the scapula with a process, spine of the scapula with a process called as acromion process. So now let us move on to the next question. We'll take here. Humerus does not articulate with. Humerus articulates with the scapula, right? We know that associated with which has a glenoid cavity, and that lower associated with radius and ulna, but not with the clavicle. So clavicle, which is attached with the generally scapula with the help of acromion process. Acromion process present seen in scapula, so that to that acromion process this clavicle articulates. Hence humerus does not articulate with clavicle. Next, long bones function. Generally long bones, right, which will be with the epiphyseal plate. So this epiphyseal plate mainly helps in the increase the length of the bone, and these long bone formation helps in the long bone formation, that is epiphyseal plate. So epiphyseal plate which helps in elongation of bone, but long bones, one with they support, bear the weight of the body, and here the bone marrow will be, so this bone marrow helps in synthesis of WBCs and RBCs. WBCs leukocytes, RBCs erythrocytes. So answer for that is supports and erythrocytes and leukocytes synthesis. Total number of bones in the hind limb. So hind limb, if you consider, that is what we can say leg. Right, here we can take that diagram. So this is what generally in the hind limb, and this is the pelvic girdle. So pelvic girdle means hip bone. We can take that later. So here it has a 3 bones, ilium, pubis and ischium. It all together forms a cavity. This cavity on their outer surface, this cavity is called as acetabulum. Acetabulum is a cavity present in what is that? Pelvic girdle. So pelvic girdle, which has 2 halves, which forms one, what is it, the half, which is called as hip bone. Hip bone is also called as coxal bone, and because of the fusion of 3 bones, 3 separate bones, we can also call it as no particular name, hence it is called as innominate bone. Idu expect manabodu, innominate bone anta hip bone na kariತೀವಿ. Hip bone is also called as coxal bone. Right, 3 separate bones, that is ilium, ischium, pubis. Right, so these are the things you have to keep it in mind. So now let us take here in the hind limb, we have femur, that is what I already mentioned, largest, longest and strongest, that articulates with the acetabulum. The femur articulates with the acetabulum of the pelvic girdle, and here is knee joint, right, that is femur articulates with tibia. Generally if you consider that in this case the tibia is the longer than the fibula, right. So both femur and the tibia, or you can say that the lower leg bones, right, forms knee joint, and this knee joint is protected by a cap called as patella. Patella is also called as kneecap. So same thing here, which has how the carpals, metacarpals and phalanges. Here we can say tarpals, metatarsals and phalanges. Tarsals forms ankle bone, metatarsals form sole bone, ankle bone are 7. There in carpals 8, here tarsals are 7. 1 reduces, but that will be compensated by this patella, extra 1. So that is why equal number in both hind limb and forelimbs. Phalanges same, formula is also same, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3. Next, so we'll take this question. Total number of bones in hind limbs. So total number of bones, that is you can count that, the femur bone, 1 femur bone, tibia 1, fibula 1, and after that we can say that the tarsals, that is instead of their carpals 8, here 7 tarsals, metatarsals, they are in rows, they are attached to the digits, metatarsals, and phalanges 14. So if you're going to count this, generally we're going along with that patella. So there we can say patella, total number of bones in hind limb. They're not asking hind limbs, one limb you should consider. So 1, 2, 9, and then patella 1, 10. So this one is 15 and 29, and we can say that generally in this case, so total number of bones in hind limb, there will be 30. That is 1 plus 1 plus 1, these 3, so plus 7, so total 10, 10 plus this 20, so total 30. So this is what you have to keep in mind. And next question, number of floating ribs. So number of floating ribs, we have generally 11th pair and 12th pairs, so that is 2 pairs. And next, glenoid cavity is found in. We mentioned that generally glenoid cavity which is present seen in scapula, that is the triangular bone, so that which is called as shoulder blade, with a ridge, that is the elevated ridge called as spine with the process called as acromion process. This is acromion process, this is glenoid cavity. And to that acromion process, what is it? The clavicle bone articulates, and to this humerus, head of the humerus articulates. So that is why that forms a pectoral girdle. Seen in clavicle and scapula forms pectoral girdle. So present seen in pectoral girdle. Acromion process is characteristically found in pelvic girdle of the mammal. No, pelvic girdle means that is hip bone. Femur of the mammal, no, that is actually in the leg region. Pectoral girdle of the mammal. So innominate bone, which is also called as hip bone. So answer is a pectoral girdle. Extremities of long bones possess cartilage. Extremities means at the end of the long bone, at the ends of the long bone, we can see calcified, cartilage. We can see calcified cartilage. So that is the thing you have to keep it in mind. So and the next question, so here we can say that the different location these the cartilage are present, and these cartilage helps in the articulation with some other bones. So that is the one. Generally we can say that the elastic bone which will be there in the ear, and we can also generally seen in the larynx, hyaline cartilage in trachea, and it's also present in the ribs, right? So these are the things you have to keep it in mind. So different types, that is calcified at the extremities. So next question we can take, part of skull having cranium, olfactory capsules, optic capsules, or you can say that the centers generally which are present seen in. So these are generally called as, so they have the centers where they are going to, olfactory capsule helps in olfaction, that is smell, which has a center, and then optic, that is in the occipital bone ends, they are called as neurocranium. So they are attached with the central nervous system, hence they are called as neurocranium. Next, which is present in the pectoral girdle. So pectoral girdle means generally which includes a shoulder joint with scapula and clavicle humerus. So sternum forms a rib cage, acetabulum in the pelvic girdle, ilium is a hip bone, one bone of the hip bone. So glenoid cavity present seen in this. Read the following, so 1 to 4 statement and select the correct one. So here Z line present in the center of the light band. So generally this is the structure of the sarcomere, right? So in this we can say the structure you have to keep it in mind, that is we have a different, what is it, the zones. We know that is A band and I band. So let us just recollect that with simple diagram. This is what, and this is a thick band, and these are the, what is that, thin bands. I will take some other color, and these are the, and these bands are attached to the Z line and they are overlap, right? So this is what you have to keep in mind. Between Z line, which is called as sarcomere, contractile unit. This is what the contracting unit of the muscle fiber, sarcomere. And this band is up to here, that is A band, and here it is I band. In I band we can see Z line, right, and one end is attached with the Z line, other end is free, that overlaps. So this is A band, which is called as anisotropic because of this overlapping, both actin, and this is actin filament, and not confined to I band, little extended to A band. But myosin, that is the green represented in the green, this is a myosin confined to A band, they are not extended to I band. So this is what sarcomere, generally we can say that sarcomere. So Z line present in the center of the light band. So here you can say this is the continuation of the next band, so that is present in the center. So we can consider that as the correct one. And next, so one, that is the correct, where we can say present at the center of the I band. So if this is the I band, so here, from here to here, if you're going to say this is the center of the I band. In the center of the I band we can see Z line. This is what? Z line. So that is correct. Next, the filament are firmly attached to the, thin filaments are firmly attached to M line. No. Thin filaments are, these are the actin. They are attached with this Z line, not with the M line. M line present seen in mid of the A band. Middle of the A band, and where there is no overlap. So this zone, where there is no overlap, that myosin and actin, this zone is called as H zone. H zone, Anson's zone, H zone, which is called as Anson's zone, right? So in this, to keep it in mind, this is not attached, wrong. Center part of thick filament is called, thick filament means myosin. Myosin is thick, actin is thin, that is I band is thin. So that is, we can say that in this is also wrong. That is central thick filament, that is actually M line, not that is Z line. Light band contains only thin filament. Light band contains, that is A band contains, sorry, I band contains, light band means I band, and this is A band is dark band. So dark band contains both myosin, and this is myosin and this is actin. But in the I light band, only actin filament. See, both sides we can see that only, what is that? So that is why it is correct. So 1 and 4 option are, what is that, the 1 and 4 option are correct. So remaining wrong. Next question. So part of the body having single pair of bones. So where exactly we can say that this single, what is it, the pair of bones. So in this case, generally the, see, in the external ear, no, what is it, generally no bones, and lower jaw, it is not a pair, actually single one. Wrist, that is, there are, generally we can say that the 8 bones are there. with a single pair of bone, that is pelvic, right? That is one of hip bone, one of one bone, other half with other bone. So two together forms pelvic girdle. So can be seen in pelvic girdle. Next question, scapula is a larger triangular flat bone situated in the dorsal part of the thorax between. So this bone is extended, that is what we can say scapula structure, which is extended from, if you're going to take that, what is it, the just a rough diagram, so that is extended from second thoracic vertebrae up to the seventh thoracic vertebra. So second thoracic vertebrae to the, what is it, the seventh thoracic vertebrae, to which second and seventh ribs in between. So here it starts second, which attaches with the sternum, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth and seventh. So in between second rib to seventh rib we can see, what is that, you can see this, what is it, scapula, right, which is extended, or I can say present dorsal part, which is present dorsal side, right. In mammals, the lower jaw is also called as, what is it, mandible. Maxilla, upper jaw. Dentary means the bone to which with teeth are attached. Teeth are attached, which will be present in both maxilla and mandible, right. So dentary to which teeth are attached. So ethmoid, generally we can say that is in the skull. Malleus is a part of, I already mentioned that generally that is the ear ossicles are malleus, incus and stapes. Malleus is hammer shape, incus is anvil shape and stapes is stirrup shape. So this malleus is a part of, all these are the part of middle ear ossicles. Next, which one of the following is correct description of certain part of normal human skeleton? So if you consider that the human skeletal, the certain characters or certain parts, so which among these statements are correct? 9th and 10th pair of ribs are called as floating ribs. That is, we can say wrong. That is 11th and 12th are floating ribs. Parietal bone and temporal bone of the skull are joined by fibrous joint. That is what we can say immovable joint. That is correct, right, and this one is wrong. Glenoid cavity is a depression which thigh bone, no, that is, what is that, humerus bone, means hand bone, upper arm bone will going to articulates, that is also wrong. First vertebra is axis, no, first vertebra is atlas, which with articulates with, generally atlas articulate with the occipital condyles of occipital bone of the skull, occipital bone. Hence, our bone which has a two condyles, right, dicondyle or bicondyle bone, two occipital condyles, right. So that is what is the answer for this. Here you can say the which one of the following is the correct statement. So this is also wrong. So only correct statement is the parietal bone and temporal bone are fibrous joint. So second option is correct. Read the following statement and find out the incorrect statement. Each organized skeleton, what is it? Each organized skeletal muscles in human body is made up of number of muscle bundle called muscle bundles. Number of muscle bundles or fascia. So whenever we are going to consider this statement, here that is, we can say that it is a correct, that is bundles, right. Each muscle bundles, that is not a fascia. Fascia is a connective tissue, it should be fascicle. That bundles are called as fascicle, right, sorry. So if you consider this is the muscle in which the bundles are present, those bundles are called as fascicle, and these fascicles, single what is it, the fascicle, and these fascicle are covered by connective tissue called as fascia. Fascia is different. Fascia is a connective tissue. Fascia is a connective tissue which covers the fascicles, all those fascicles, bundles. So single, what is it, the fascicle, single fascicle covered by, that is, we can say perimysium. This is what? Perimysium, keep it in mind. And all muscle covered by, we will take in yellow, that is all muscle outside covered by epimysium. This is called as epimysium, right? And inside the muscle fibers are there, and these are covered by, I'll take black color, and these are covered by endomysium. So this is what you have to keep in mind. So that is why the first one is incorrect statement. Next, visceral muscles are located in the inner walls of the allovisceral organs of body like alimentary canal and reproductive tract. That is correct. So visceral muscles already we discussed. That is spindle shape, that non-striated. Skeletal muscles have a striped appearance, means striations will be there. Correct. Microscope ends they are called as striated. Correct. Skeletal muscles closely associated with skeleton ends the name, we can say skeletal muscles. That is also correct. So wrong one is first one. So next, the type of muscles present in the alimentary canal. Just now we discussed, that is they are smooth muscles. So we can say that alimentary canal, we can see that is the smooth muscles. Next, head of the humerus articulated with the pectoral girdle by what type of, what is the joint? Head of the humerus, I have already mentioned that, that is there will be movement in all planes, ends, it is called as ball and socket. I have mentioned this ball and socket, but not this. The movement will be there in all planes because of the ball and socket joint. So pivot joint between atlas and axis, between atlas and axis. Immovable, which is called as fibrous joints, present seen in skull. Fibrous joint, and then hinge joint is a synovial joint. Example for synovial joint. Next question, epiphyseal plate. Already I mentioned that at the end of the each bone we can see that is the epiphyseal plate. So that epiphyseal plate helps in the elongation of, what is it, bone. Elongation of bone. And mandible bone of lower jaw articulate with the following cranial bone. I already mentioned that, that is the lower jaw, it is movable and articulates with the temporal, right? That is what we can say, temporal bone. ATPase of the muscle located in. So this is in structure, we can recollect that. So we can take this in the next part. So that is where we can see the head of the, what is it, the myosin. Right, so here we can see actin binding site and myosin binding site, and this is actin binding site, and this one is, sorry, these two are myosin binding site and lower side, that is in the back side we can see that is overlapped by head. So that is what we can take like this also. Better to take this. So here these are the actin binding sites of the myosin, and these are the ATP binding site. ATP binding site and actin binding site. So ATPase of the muscle located in myosin head. Why? Because that is to hydrolyze the ATP. So ATP should be, what is it, the hydrolyzed by ATPase, which is also called as myosin ATPase, as it is present in myosin. Hydrolyze that into ATP and inorganic phosphate. So that is the one that is present seen in myosin. Next, Contraction of muscle fiber takes place by sliding. So already in this thick filament over which thin filaments will going to slide. So thin filament over actin filament. These are also thin. Thick filament over thin filament. Thick filament over, no, thin filament over, this is also wrong. Thick filament over myosin. These are also thick. Thin filaments over thick filament. That is what? Actin over myosin. So with this we can stop this. We'll take remaining questions in the next chapter, that is next part.